was,
Nice to have
really
relatives
great.
and friends, or near friends.
Yeah.
That's great.
Welcome to Behind the Pages. Lissa Warren is with us today to talk about the Good Luck Cat. Lissa is the Vice President and the Senior Director of Publicity for Da Capo Press. She is also a published poet, and her work has appeared in a number of different journals. She is here today to talk about The Good Luck Cat, which is a memoir about her cat Ting. And the joys basically that Ting has brought to her in her life, and the comfort that Ting has provided for her in times of trouble and sorrow. Welcome, Lissa.
Thank you, Diane. Nice to be with you.
Let's start by having you talk to us about your cat. How did she first become a part of your family?
Well, we had a Burmese as our first cat, and when she passed away, we loved the breed, but we felt like we had our Burmese, but we wanted to find a breed that was somewhat similar in personality and temperament, and even in size and appearance to some extent. Yeah. So we called around to breeder after determining that a Karat from Thailand was the breed that we wanted, and we asked for the runt of the litter because we're all small people, and we didn't think that having a 15-pound cat on our laps was going to work. So she's a whopping 7 pounds, and we found a breeder that had a female runt of the litter. We wanted a female, and we arranged to meet at a cat show, and that's where we got to take her home, meet her for the first time and take her home.
And what part of your decision to get a cat had to do with your dad?
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. He had a quadruple bypass about 15 years prior, and not all of the grafts had taken. And so his energy level was fairly low. He was able to get around, didn't really look like a sick man, but just really, needed quiet activities, crossword puzzles and baseball games to watch and books to read, and needed a cat to keep him company to do all of those things, especially because I work full-time and wasn't around during daylight hours, and because my mother worked full-time, so he was really home alone, but not anymore after Ting showed up.
So the cat that you had prior to Ting Pei, her name was Cinnamon?
Yes.
Yes. And you had her from the time you were young?
Yeah, from the time I was 5 until she died when she was 19.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So your love of cats really started early in your life.
We're a small family. It was just me, my mom, and my dad, and I'm an only child. So Cinnamon, was my playmate growing up, and was family. And I was raised to believe that animals are full family members, with all of the rights and dignities of a full-fledged family member. So Cinnamon was a Warren, and now Ting is a Warren.
Absolutely. You put a lot of thought into the type of cat, and you just started to talk about that. Well, a Korat isn't a type of cat I've ever heard of. Yeah. How did you hear about this?
They're fairly unusual. God bless Google. Honestly, we just typed in Burmese and looked at breeds that were somewhat similar and just fell in love with the beauty of them. But they're also known for being intensely loyal and very smart. She's just a compact, little, adorable, beautiful thing. And our hearts just fell for the breed before we'd ever even met a Karat. And we did a lot of research to make sure that they were not a super, super high energy cat because of my dad, but she just felt like a good fit. So it was just research on the web that brought her to us, really.
Oh, I see. Okay. And then when you actually went to get her, you almost didn't.
Yeah.
The owners almost didn't give her up, right?
The breeders had shown her, unbeknownst to us, that morning, and she had won ribbons. And they had thought that she was not a show cat, that maybe they'd seen a slight banding in her tail or a little kink or something. I don't even know what they saw. Maybe it was just because she was so tiny, being the runt of the litter. They did not think that she was a show cat, but she won ribbons, and then they wanted to keep her. But they saw my face fall when they told me that, and they realized that we already thought of her as family and had a name for her, and my parents were at home waiting for me to bring her home, and so...
And you drove all the way to...
I had driven to New Jersey to pick her up, from Boston to New Jersey to pick her up, and so they didn't turn me away empty-handed, thank goodness. My life would have been so different if they had.
Oh, I know, it's just so close. I never quite understand cat shows or animal shows or what... I don't know. Is this something that you'd ever done or would ever consider?
No, we never had, and to be honest, I don't think we ever would. I mean, cats tend not to like loud, busy places, and those tend to be loud, busy places, and I don't think we'd want to put a cat through that. That said, there are many cats who their whole lives that's what they do, or at least in their young years that's what they do. They're really acclimated to it. They don't seem to mind it. I don't think they're miserable. It is a nice way to showcase the various breeds out there and to help people to find the breeds that are right for their family. So I will give them that.
Right.
But it isn't something that we have ever done or would likely ever do.
Yeah. Have you been to cat shows before?
I went to one.
Okay. I'm just trying to picture what,
what they're
dog
like.
shows, their dogs are performing and stuff. But
no,
what happens in
the
a cat
cats
show?
do get judged. They don't have to walk around the ring, so to speak,
No.
but they are put on tables and inspected, basically, to make sure that their coat is nice and that the spacing between their eyes is nice and that they have good teeth and that they're alert and well adjusted, I guess.
Yeah.
But it really is a chance for people to just go and look and see, the difference between an Abyssinian and a Bengal.
Okay.
So it's a chance to familiarize yourself with the breeds.
Ting's first days in your house were pretty wild, weren't they?
Yeah, we got her home, and the first thing she did was jump in the toilet, which
That was
really
such a funny scene that you described.
Oh
in
my
your
gosh!
book.
I went running. My mom went running. My mom got to her first, and
Well, how did you know she was in the toilet?
well, we just heard this death yowl, and then a splash, and we just thought, uh-oh. So we went running, but I had on socks. We have hardwood floors. I went careening into my mom, and the towel bar came down, and poor little Ting was just terrified. And then we decided that it wouldn't be safe for her to lick herself, to clean herself, having been in the toilet where there are germs.
Yeah.
So I had the bright idea to put on my bathing suit and try to take a shower with the cat.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
I don't know if you've ever tried to take a shower with a cat.
Well, I've had to de-skunk a cat.
Okay,
once, so
all right.
yes,
so you
it's
kind of
similar.
feel my pain.
That's right.
But if
Yes.
you haven't tried it, folks, don't do it.
No.
It doesn't work well.
They kind of just cling to you, right?
Yeah, for dear
yeah.
life. And then she
Yes.
used my head as a trampoline to get out of there. Who could blame her, really?
She also created some new Christmas traditions for you too, didn't she?
She did. She was determined to scale that Christmas tree, and she tried and she tried, and she'd knock down ornament after ornament, and break some of them, of course, in the process. And then she finally did make it to the top of the tree, and was there like a star on top of it. She's very silver gray, and it was really quite beautiful until she tipped it over and took the whole tree down with her.
Oh.
So those kinds of shenanigans were typical of her throughout her kittenhood. She's mellowed quite a lot, but
Yeah.
she's still
Was
a
it
handful
just the first
sometimes.
year, or for many years?
Oh,
was she
many
kind of
years.
Wild like
many
that?
years. I would say until she was maybe 10 or 11.
Oh,
She
okay.
was really rambunctious, which we loved. It's sort of like the Crot is kind of the biker boyfriend of the animal world. Like you shouldn't, but you kind of can't help it.
Yes, you
she's
can't stay
naughty,
away.
but you just can't love her. You can't stay away. So she was always good entertainment, and she was great entertainment for my dad. She wasn't just wonderful company. She was laughter for him and joy.
So what were his days like with her while you guys were gone all day?
Yeah, they had their little routines. They really did. She would love to fetch, which not all cats can do, but she was able to and loved to do. And so he would just take rolled up pipe cleaners, kind of curled like a pig's tail, and throw them across the room at her, and she'd chase them and bring them back to him. They would nap a lot together. She'd sit right on the bottom of the bed, or sometimes she'd even sit right on his chest and nap, which was, I think, wonderful for him. And
Absolutely, yeah.
she was just that familiar presence when the house was empty. He could call her from another room and she'd come running. When he would go upstairs, she would follow him. And when we were home, he would always turn around to make sure that my mom and I were seeing her follow him, because any good thing, my dad loved to share it.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Did she feel like she was your dad's cat or the family cat?
She felt like the family cat, but it was very clear who her favorite was. And we were happy with that. We wanted him to be her
that was
favorite.
deliberate.
That was the idea.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we all adored her. We just couldn't get enough of her and still can't.
Yeah, yeah. So for you, in a sense, you've almost majored in cats in your academic career, haven't you?
Well, I do study them a bit, I have to
Yeah.
say. I study their history. I also just like literature that's about cats, whether it's Gerald Stern's poem, Another Insane Devotion, or stories like Hemingway's Cat in the Rain. I am so drawn to cats and so drawn to literature, and the intersection of the two is endlessly fascinating to me.
Yeah. And major authors have written about
Oh
cats,
yeah,
haven't
sure.
they?
Margaret Atwood. I mean, many just fabulous, fabulous authors, and many painters too have painted cats. Some of my favorites haven't, like Klimt and Modigliani. I wish they had. I think they would have done such justice to
Yeah.
cats. But there are so many others who have painted them.
Do you want to give us some examples of who has painted
Sure.
about cats?
Matisse has. Seurat, I believe, has. You know, many of the masters have, and you know, some of them do it in more abstract ways. Those I personally like a little bit less because they don't seem as cat-like, but there are others who just really spot on capture the essence of cats.
What do you think it is about cats that's so artistically appealing?
I think it's the fact that you feel in a way like you never quite know them. I mean, we know Ting really well now after 19 years and everything that we've been through with her, but it takes a long time to get to know a cat. And I think for an artist or a poet, they are people who make their lives by observing. And cats live to be observed. So it's a good fit.
I think so too. Maybe too, it's some of the postures that they have.
Yeah, yeah. Their contortions are amazing. They really kind of are.
I'm not even an artist, but I love watching my cats, the way they sleep, for instance, when they sleep kind of on the top of their head like that and tuck it under. And there's something, if I did draw, I think I would want to, I would want to
just their languid bodies. It's just, they're beautiful. They are.
Absolutely. So in terms of, you know, I love that analogy, by the way, about the a naughty cat. You like a naughty cat better because they are like that, like her boyfriend, which you were just, you know, talking about. And what other kinds of ways did she kind of make herself, her personality known in your house in the earlier days?
Well, I do remember one Christmas my mother had put these little china mice on top of a mantle that we have, and we went upstairs and had a few holiday rum and cokes in us, and we heard this little sort of tinkling noise that kept happening, and we thought, that's odd. And my mother said, icicles are falling off the roof, and we just, you know, laughed and thought it was lovely. Meanwhile, Ting had found a way to get up onto the mantle and systematically, mouse by mouse by mouse, knocked them onto the floor. So we awoke the next morning to a mass grave of mice, china mice, on the floor. But that was typical of her. I mean, antics, you just never knew what she was going to destroy or who she was going to jump on. She would run across the room and just hurl herself at neighbors, complete strangers, anyone she could.
Cats are very unique, but there are some things that are common to cats, that sort of need that they have to knock something over if they see it on a table.
They love it.
Or to just suddenly run from one room to the next.
Oh, she has a nutty on occasion. Yes, that's what we call it. She just puffs her tail up, puffs her body up, and just runs onto anything or anyone in her way. Couch, back of the chair, television, you name it, she'll hop on it.
And I could never quite figure that out. Why, you know,
I don't know what that is.
Where are they going? What happened?
I really don't know, but they just get themselves all riled up, and they're just these little balls of energy, and sometimes it's almost like the energy is too much for them to handle. Yeah. I think that's actually part of their charm, is that kind of the mystery of where this behavior comes from. You know, dogs are really a different animal. You know, they're easier to figure out.
They are easier to figure out, and I can't say they relate better to humans, because I think both animals do.
I agree.
You know, they just have different ways of doing that.
I agree.
Yeah. So what do you think it is about cats that makes people so drawn to them?
I think it's their capacity for affection and their capacity for stillness sometimes. I mean, even though Ting is so rambunctious, or was when she was younger, she could also just sit there and be still as an egg. That's a line from a Marge Piercy poem. She was also a good writer about cats.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why it is that people are so drawn to cats. I think some of it is the mystery, the beauty, and the self-contentment, I guess, that I think a cat has. You know, they like being with humans, but one always has a sense that if push came to shove, they would get along just fine without them. And there's something in that spirit of just being able to take care of themselves and be so self-possessed that I like, that I'm drawn to.
Yeah. What do you say? I mean, I'm sure you're talking a lot about cats these days since you're
Sure.
talking
Yeah.
about your book. What do you say to people who say, "Oh, I don't like cats," or "I just don't get cats"?
I feel awful for them. I feel like they're missing out on a really great thing in life. And I would say they don't know them, or they haven't gotten to know the right cats. You know, you don't like all human beings who you meet, and sometimes you have to meet a few cats before you find one who you really connect with.
That's true.
So I would encourage them to keep trying.
Have you had any interviews with people who you feel like you have to keep explaining, this is what's great about cats?
I do hear from people occasionally who say, oh, I'm a dog lover, I'm a dog person.
Yeah.
And I find that in that case, it's really that same core desire to protect an animal and understand an animal and love an animal. And I think that dog lovers are far more similar to cat lovers than they are different. So I have had a bit of that. I have had a few. Oh, I'm a dog person, but I say, if you love an animal, then you're my kind of person.
Right.
Any kind of animal, you're my kind of person.
Yes. So when your dad, there was a point at which in your book you talk about how your dad kind of stopped interacting with Ting. And that's how and he was kind of short-tempered with her, which was not at all typical for him. That's when you knew he was depressed. Can you tell us about that period of time?
He, because of all his health issues, he did eventually just really get depressed. And, he was never short with her or cruel with her, but, we would see that he some days wasn't willing to make the effort to crawl a little bit under the bed and look for the toy that she lost, or his job every morning was to change her water, and sometimes it would be noon or late afternoon before he'd get around to it. And it was those subtle things where it told us that he was not feeling well, physically or emotionally. And we could very much monitor his well-being by her well-being and how he interacted with her. So it was really a telltale sign for us that he was struggling.
Yeah, and at that time, I think it also had to do with his back. He was having some very severe
he had spinal
back pain.
stenosis, which is a narrowing of the spinal cord, and he was in a great deal of pain all the time. And then finally, we found a wonderful, wonderful surgeon who was able to help him. And it was so great to see him be able to crawl around with her and roll around on the floor with her and bend to pick her up without having to think twice about it. That meant everything to us.
It must have been really scary for you when he was having that surgery, because he had not had a good result from his original bypass.
We weren't sure that the cardiologist would clear him to have the spinal surgery. In all honesty, we were a little surprised that they did. But he felt so good after that surgery, the spinal surgery. We were so thankful.
Absolutely, yeah. You lost your dad to a massive heart attack in December of 2008.
December 18th, 2008.
You know the date? Yeah.
Of course.
I know. Yeah. It's hard. What was Ting's reaction to your father being gone, and what was it like for you to watch that?
Yeah, it was hard. I remember coming home that first time from the hospital right after we'd lost him, and it was early morning, and it was just too beautiful of a day out. It felt like the world should be ugly now, and it was still gorgeous, and that just threw me. And when we walked in the door, she came to the top of the stairs to look down and look for him, and then when she saw that he wasn't there, she turned around and walked back up to the bedroom, and that crushed me. And in the subsequent weeks and even months, she was lethargic. I mean, she did not have the spunk that she had always had, and she slept a lot more. And, I don't know if intellectually animals process grief, but it seemed almost like physically she processed grief. She would walk sometimes from room to room just crying. And, we have no proof that she was crying for him, but that wasn't something that she did when he was alive. So, she felt his loss too. And in a way, although we wanted her to feel happy again, it was comforting to know that it wasn't just me and my mom who were grieving, that it was her too.
Absolutely, yeah. Your father had a known history of cardiac disease, because you describe what happened in quite a bit of detail in your book. So he had a known history of cardiac disease. He went to the hospital with chest pain, but his symptoms were really not treated with the seriousness that they should have been, were they?
No, they weren't. He had a problem with his blood cells as well, myeloproliferative disease, which is kind of called pre-leukemia sometimes. And the emergency room doctors thought that the problems that he was having, the pains in his chest, were due somehow to that, and that maybe he needed an infusion. It was just a misdiagnosis. And by the time it really escalated, by the time the pain had moved from his chest to his jaw, which is a telltale sign, it was really too late at that point, I guess, for intervention. But they didn't even try. I mean, they had a cardiac catheterization lab right there in the hospital that they never tried to use to save him. And that is a very hard thing for me to live with and for my mother to live with, not just because we feel like the doctors failed him, but because we feel like because the doctors failed him and we were right there, we feel like we failed him too. And that was a very, very difficult thing to live with, and still is to some extent.
Well, I'm sure it is, although you really, realistically speaking, in an emergency room can't say, I demand a cardiac catheterization.
Right,
you
of
know,
course,
I mean,
we're not MDs.
No,
of course.
no,
Yeah.
yeah. I happen to also, in my other part of my life, work in the medical field. I'm a nurse practitioner, so I was kind of reading that part with some surprise because it seems like the first assumption you would make with somebody with chest pain
is heart attack.
Yeah, is heart attack.
They did an EKG, but it didn't show what it would have needed to show to cause alarm, I guess.
Yeah. Well, they probably didn't know, I don't know what his previous one had shown or whatever to look at.
They maybe didn't have something to compare and contrast.
But
it's
still,
complicated.
That was
it's always
very disturbing to read about. So then a year later, Ting developed heart problems.
Yeah, she passed out, and we thought perhaps she'd ingested some poison. We looked all around the house and Googled everything, and didn't know what had happened, and took her to the vet. And the vet, listened to her heart with a stethoscope and turned to us and said, "Wow, it's really low." And we said, "How low?" And she said, "Low like a dog's heart low." Apparently dogs' heart rates are much lower than cats. So she had Ting have an EKG, and then she came back into the room looking more serious than I had ever known her. This was our family vet who had been Cinnamon's vet. I mean, she is someone we'd known for so many years, and she looked so very serious, and she said, "Well, I have good news and bad news. The bad news is Ting has second-degree AV block, which is a very serious heart condition, where you could pass out and just not wake up at any time." She said, "But the good news is what she needs is a pacemaker, and we can get one for her." So began our odyssey to get a pacemaker for our little 7-pound Karat.
Do you want to tell us about that odyssey a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. We took her to Angel Animal Medical Center in Jamaica Plain. Wonderful place, amazing people. We took her to see a cardiologist. They have specialists in every field: oncology, cardiology. They have a pain management specialist. I mean, they're just phenomenal. And the cardiologist said that they had a pacemaker that would work for her, that we could have, and she showed it to us, and it was this big, silver thing, like bigger than a silver dollar and thick, and we thought, how is that going to fit in our little 7-pound girl? But the cardiologist assured us that they could make a pocket sort of where her flank is and get it under the skin, and that it was an intricate surgery because you're connecting, a big device with little wires to a little beating cat heart. But that they could do it. And so surgery day came. She had the surgery. We were so very nervous the entire time she was in there. But then that vet walked out and flashed 2 big thumbs up with a giant smile on her face, and we knew that she had made it through the surgery. We were so grateful.
Absolutely. And she has continued to do well.
Yeah, she's doing great. She hasn't had a fainting spell since the surgery. Since the pacemaker was implanted, it's still ticking along, going strong. She doesn't notice it, when it fires, just like with a human, you don't know when it fires. And she's adjusted to it completely. They positioned it in a place that was really good. She's able to jump around still and has full use of all of her limbs, and she's a happy little 19-year-old cat.
I know, she's 19.
She's 19 now. She was 14 when she had the pacemaker implanted.
When I started reading the book, I wasn't sure if we were going to be reading about the memory of her.
I know. No, there's a happy ending. Wow. There's a happy ending for sure.
Yeah. It takes a lot, though, for her now to keep her.
Yeah, it does. She has a little bit of kidney failure, so my mother and I give her subcutaneous injections 2 or 3 times a week, and she has asthma. So she has a puff, just like a human would have an inhaler. And there's this great plastic device called an AeroCat that has a little rubber on the end, and you just put it up to her face, and you squirt the puff, and she breathes deep, and you wait for her to inhale it, and that keeps the asthma under control. So she is a lot of work, but worth it. So worth it.
Absolutely. Well, she's given you so much over the years.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think when you get to that point in your animal's life that you just kind of feel like, well, I'll do anything back.
Of course.
You know, she's given me so much.
Yeah,
you know,
family is family.
Exactly.
You know, you do what you have to do.
Yes, you do. What inspired you to write this book about Ting?
I think I wanted people to know that even though animals can be a lot of work, they are so worth it, and can enrich a person's life and a family's life so very much. But I also, of course, wanted to pay tribute to my dad, who was such a remarkable person, and also tribute to my mom, who put her life on hold to nurse that cat back to health, because it was an uphill battle for many, many weeks after the surgery, and even many weeks prior to the surgery, because she had to wear a heart monitor, and we had to capture an episode so that they would know how to pace her properly with the pacemaker. So it's very much a tribute to my mom and my dad, and to this little cat who changed our lives.
And the values that your parents really communicated to you.
Yeah, they raised me well. They did. And you know, it's funny, as an adult, when you look back and you see not just the sacrifices that they made, but the examples that they set. I mean, I hope that that comes through in the book, that they're just amazing people.
Yeah, I think earlier in the book, too, you talk about how watching your dad interact with Ting reminded you of how his parenting style, that was a similar parenting style to how he raised you.
He was not the type of father, and my mother wasn't the type of mother who worried terribly much about things like curfews, or you know, I didn't have an allowance. If I needed money for something legitimate, they gave it to me. I mean, they just didn't have a lot of rules. They were just really not loosey-goosey about it, but they just sort of let me be who I was, and I was a pretty responsible kid, and they just let me be myself. And the way that he was with Ting was like that too, a little indulgent, but you know, he'd reel her in when he needed to. And it did remind me very much of the way that they had raised me, the way that he raised her, and the way that my mom raised Ting.
We have only about a minute or so left, but I did want you to talk to us a little bit about the writing of this book, because you had some special challenges.
Yeah, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, about 25,000 words into a 65,000 word manuscript, came out of the blue. And I wrote the book with 17 lesions on my brain.
Wow.
14 infusions while I was writing it, 4 MRIs. It was an uphill battle, but it makes the book all the more dear to me, and it makes doing things like this all that much sweeter to me. And I'm doing well now. The medicine's finally kicked in. I'm doing great.
Well, I'm glad that you are. We are unfortunately out of time. You have been watching Behind the Pages from the staff of 22 City View. I'm Diane Goshgarian. Yes, I can imagine that, you know, trying to write and then be dealing with a very scary diagnosis.
Yeah, it's a
well, also
serious
before
thing.
you even knew what the diagnosis was.